Hi, folks. Welcome to the Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas. I'm bela.and.mike.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike. Today's guest on the podcast is Reiner Lomb. Reiner is the author of Aspire, 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change, no matter where you are. He has been an executive at several major international corporations and turned his experience and philosophies into a very active coaching and leadership facilitation business.
It's exciting, Bela. And I think this is our 150th episode, right?
Yes.
Which
Quite
is
a milestone.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Quite
so
a milestone.
Thinking about developing and trying to talk about leadership and coaching, which are a couple of themes that we've talked about several times on the podcast. I think it's an interesting 150th. But this seems like a really interesting guest. And I'm always a little bit skeptical, Bela, about leadership development. The research is, kind of all over the place, and there's about 150 million different ways to do this. So I'm always skeptical, but Reiner Lomb seems like a really interesting guest. That I've noticed that the last few years, and I've read other people writing about this, have brought out kind of this larger emotional variability and higher volume, and there's a lot more emotions that it's attributed to COVID. I don't know, but all the stress or whatever. But so I'm kind of interested right now to kind of hear what Reiner has to say about emotions and how it's related to leadership, because I think it's probably really relevant and really timely right now. So what do you say? Should we get right to the interview with Reiner Lomb?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's jump in and listen to my interview with Reiner. Hello, listeners. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest, Reiner Lomb. He is an author and a very accomplished individual who is going to share with us what he has learned in his book called Aspire. Welcome to the podcast, Reiner.
It's a pleasure to be here, Bela.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So your book is about 7 essential emotions for leading positive change. And as I was paging through some of it, it got me to thinking that I have experienced in my career leaders who have shown no emotion at all. Some leaders have shown emotion, and some of those have figured out how to make that emotion very productive. And others, that emotion was oftentimes, I'll just say, less productive. So can you sort of talk about the big picture here a little bit?
Yeah, it's a wonderful introduction in terms of your experiences with emotions. In my career, I have been both. I've been starting businesses and growing them into, helping to grow them into hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars of businesses. And that comes really only with working well with people. Mobilizing people, influencing them positively, which is actually, the key of leadership, right? To have a vision and influence people. But what is it about in influencing people? It's really changing behavior to make the vision a reality, including starting with your own behavior as a leader. But what drives our behaviors? There's our needs, there's our values, there's our beliefs. But one of the strongest drivers, and maybe the strongest drivers overall, are emotions. And if we want it or not, we are always in an emotional state. We are not just in an emotional state of one emotion. We are typically in a mixture of emotion. And so mostly, maybe the people that you observed in regard to emotions, they were not even aware of what emotional state they were in. They were just acting on whatever they were feeling. And some people maybe have learned over time to become aware of it and become aware of other people's emotion and use it as a leadership skill. That's what I'm writing about in Aspire. So my key premise is that everybody can create positive change, no matter your listeners, no matter where they are. But in order to create positive change, you need to create a change in behavior. You have to have a positive vision of the future, need to create change in behavior of the people, influencing the behavior of people, starting with your own behavior. And in order to do that, you need to learn about emotions. You need to learn to understand, to feel your own emotions, to become aware of them, become aware of emotions of others, and be able to shift your emotions to an emotion that supports the leadership behavior that you need in that moment.
Yes, yes, very good. So can we go through, in your book you talk about 7 essential emotions. Can we sort of just kind of go through those one at a time a little bit? So what's the first one in your book?
Yeah, maybe it's good to go in blocks of 3. I found that beneficial.
Sure.
So this is built like a pyramid from the bottom up. So the first 3 are empathy, compassion, and interest. And these are all emotions. These are what people feel. Empathy is you feel the feeling of another person. It's emotional empathy, right? And that drives caring. If I feel that you are in pain, if I feel your pain, if I'm a mentally healthy person, then I will care about you.
Yes.
But caring alone is not enough, right? For a leader, we're talking about a leadership behavior. Caring is important. We know that caring organizations perform better than non-caring organizations. And let's say on the opposite side, if employees feel their leader is not caring about them, they're not going to trust the leader. Now, caring is not enough. You need also to act on your caring, and that takes compassion. Compassion is basically the emotion that commits you to serve the needs of the people, the needs of the people you care about. So for a leader, it's the stakeholders, it's the employees, it's the clients, it's the investors, it's the board, etc., etc. So there's this whole complex construct of stakeholders that they really are committed to serve the needs of those people. And the third one is interest, which you need to understand. Interest is the emotion that keeps you trying to understand something. So a leader, let's say you want to transform healthcare, you want to transform the education system, or you want to, other industries, whatever, we can take any examples. The leader needs to have a deep understanding of those issues, needs to have an understanding of the needs of the people, the possible solutions in order to innovate in that space. And that takes a sustained interest, which many leaders don't have. I have observed that's a big gap, right? So a new leader comes in, makes quickly decisions without really have the full picture of understanding. Empathy, compassion, and interest build the foundation for caring, for committing to serving really the needs of the people. And the third one is a deep understanding. The world is complex, so we have to put a lot of effort in understanding the world better before we can lead to transform it.
Yeah. So can you is it possible to give an example of these 3 that we just talked about? The words mean different things to different people. So if I don't know if you have any examples that you can sort of talk about.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, let's just take an executive that one of the one I coach. I coach so many, but in this case, it was a lady that had been hired by a leading telecom company. She had been put into a leadership position with a team, and that team was not doing so well. She was hired to transform that team to higher performance, to meet their goal. This was a service-oriented team, a customer-facing team, senior people, all they had the competence and the knowledge, and her task was really to make them more effective, more successful, and meet her goals and quota and things than she had. And when she hired me as her coach, she was about 6 months into the job, and she was pulling her hair. She said, I don't know, they're not motivated. They don't perform, I can see it in the meetings and so on. And I say, well, tell me a little bit more about it. So how do you view them? How do you behave them? And she said, what do you think, why they're not motivated? She said, well, they are lazy, she said. She said, that was her assessment of them.
Yeah.
And I said, so what do you know about them, really? I said, I don't know much. I know they're paid well and they should perform well because they're paid well. So the point here is she didn't come in with cultivating her empathy, trying to understand. She didn't come with interest in the people. She hadn't developed any compassion for them. So they didn't trust her. Somebody put a new leader in place. Maybe they even sabotaged her subconsciously. I don't know that. But once she became aware of that, what was really lacking, that she didn't really understand what would motivate those people, what maybe possibly not just motivate, would inspire them, which I come later to, which is much more powerful than extrinsic motivation. And so many leaders that come into a leadership position, they don't know the people they are leading, and they're failing because they don't. What are the needs of the people? What do you really care about? And how do I align, my vision that I have for the business, for the company, with the aspirations of my team?
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. So you said blocks of 3. So we got 4 more to go.
Yeah. So once the leader has built that foundation of empathy, compassion, and interest, then the next 3 are optimism, which allows a leader to see a vision, a positive vision of the future. Without optimism, somebody or relatable emotion such as hope that takes him into the future, a leader cannot create a vision, right? So that's the first one. The second one is really, now let's say a leader has developed a vision for the future that's really exciting and that addresses the needs and the issues of the people. Then it comes to mobilize people, and that comes to inspiration. So the next emotion is inspiration. And once a leader has inspired people, so let's say you are an entrepreneur, you started a new company and startup and so on, leader needs to mobilize people to invest, to hire people, the first, group of people, the first clients, to maybe buy the prototype, product or service or whatever. And so mobilization is important, and mobilization comes through inspiration. But if you have mobilized people and you have they show up and say, let's all pull up their sleeves and say, let's go and do something, you need to coordinate effective actions as a leader. And that takes trust as an emotion, which is one of the most complex emotions that I have felt, because it has multiple directions, and I can go into that a little bit later if you like to. But, so these are the 3: optimism, inspiration, and trust. They drive the ability to envision a better future. They drive the ability to mobilize people and to collaborate effectively, to create effective actions towards that vision. So that this is the next block of 3.
Yeah.
The last one, Bela, is actually, now we know with the pandemic, we know with the unfortunate war in the Ukraine, with the inflation and all these things that happen, things happen all the time. And so the leader can have a wonderful plan, and the people are marching all in the same direction, and one day to the next, something happens and the plans need to change. And that's where a leader needs to be resilient, not just by him or herself, but also facilitate resilience among the people the leader is leading. Okay, but what drives resilience from an emotional perspective is positivity, which is not a single emotion, it's a palette of emotions. And these include some of the emotions I talked earlier about, like optimism, inspiration, interest. These are all positive emotions that a leader can cultivate. But also there's joy, there's gratitude, there's hopefulness, and many, many others, etc. And a leader can actually, and I have, me as a leader, I have practiced that, most of my career leading teams. You can tap into sources of positivity that make your team much more resilient, especially in tough times, right? And so resiliency as overcoming a setback, overcoming adversities, a sudden change, something that shocks you, and you could go into a negative spiral, or your whole team could go into negativity and not be resilient, not being able to overcome it. Or the leader can choose, no, we're not going there. I'm going to cultivate positive emotions to help everybody to get through this.
Yeah. So as you have coached people in the past, which one of these 7 do you think is there one in this list of 7 that people have the most challenge with?
Yeah. I would say for each person it's different. Each leader is different. I just did an exercise last week with a group of leaders, like 25 leaders, all senior leaders, and we went through a one-day training about all these. And then at the end, I asked them to do an assessment and find the one they struggle most with, because that's the greatest opportunity for development, where they can get the quickest turnaround. And the things that came up was people were doing relatively well based on their own assessment with, let's say, empathy in this group. It might be another group, might be different with the foundations, empathy and compassion. Some were struggling with keeping their interest on the topic, really understanding what they were talking about and staying interested because of the distraction that's going on and so many things in a large organization. That was one. So one leader committed, he wanted to work cultivating that interest. Another one was like, he or she believed that in order to be an inspirational leader, you need to have charisma. So she never tried to inspire people. And she said, well, I learned in this workshop, in this training, that I can be inspiring even if I'm not charismatic, naturally charismatic.
Yes.
Right? Because there's many ways, and in the book I write about those. There's different styles to inspire leaders. The style that fits the leader. Okay. So sometimes, like, I had leaders that were not like super charismatic, but the way they supported me, the way they saw my talent and helped me to develop that and allow me to grow and give me challenges that were just the right challenges for me for the next step, that inspired me. Yes. Sometimes it was just like I'm knocking on their door and say, I'm stuck here. And they would pull up a chair and said, let's sit down and talk about it.
Yes.
And I would leave the office inspired because I could go out and take the next step. Okay. Yes. So I'm just saying, this is another one that people sometimes think, oh, I can be an inspirational leader. No, everybody can be an inspirational leader, finding their own style, how to inspire people. Another one that is a big one, and that was in this group also, there was one leader, a lady, based on her history of oppression and about like her personal, and it goes into the like minority issues and so on.
Yes.
She has said, my whole life I struggled with trust. I've been distrusting, and it comes from my family history and my own personal history.
Yes.
And I'm still struggling today. And I now recognize today that if I'm not trusting, I'm not a good leader. I cannot foster collaboration in the way I should do. And that she took on and said, I have to work on this. And then we designed some exercises and so on. So these were just a few examples. I would say resilience and maintaining positivity is also a big one.
Yes.
Some people brought up. So you see, it's a little bit across the board, and it is very individualistic, and it's also situational.
Yeah. Very nice. So, one of the things I was thinking about is if I look at this list of 7, many people might look at that list of 7 and say, well, you have these naturally. They're not an acquired skill. They're not an acquired talent. But in actuality, they are. They are something that you can develop and learn. So can you talk about that a little bit on how one can polish their skills in these areas?
Yeah. I mean, at first I need to re-emphasize that emotions can be learned. Okay. And what makes it difficult is that we are in the school system, or how we raised, and also in the corporate world, this is not something that conventional wisdom would suggest. Like we're rational trained, right? So in the universities, in the schools, to sharpen our rational mind, and there's nothing bad about it, but it is not covering our whole potential, our whole capabilities. Okay, as I said before, emotions are a very strong driver of our behaviors, and stronger so as many other of the aspects I shared before. Now, research has shown that emotions we can learn to shift emotions. Okay. And I didn't believe it first either until I experienced it myself. I had to learn it myself. Now, the challenge is there's over 250 emotions, depending what experts you talk to. And you can be in a mix at any given time. So it's very hard to learn. So it's like almost like a new complex language, or even multiple languages. So the point is, how can you learn it? First of all, I picked the ones that are for transformational leaders, for leaders that want to create change, transformational change, aspirational change, positive change. I picked those emotions that, from my experience, have been most effective in my own leadership, driving the leadership behavior I needed, but also in coaching others for many years now, over a decade. And so I picked those one. And then each of these have different exercises that you can use in order to learn them. Okay.
Very nice.
Right. So, and I'm still learning. I tell you, this is a learning in the emotional space that never ends.
Yes.
Because you can always fall, something happens in life and you can fall in, there's emotions that keep us from acting towards what we want to act to, and there's emotions that drive and support the behavior. And so it's a question of constantly becoming self-aware, but also aware of the emotional state of others, especially when we lead. You might know that sometimes, you want to lead somebody, you want to talk to somebody, and they're in an emotional state, you cannot talk to them.
Right.
If you try it anyway, you make the situation worse. Parents know that with their children, right? Kind of.
Right. Parents know that. Yes, very true.
But leaders also need to know that. So I'm saying, so you can learn. You can become aware and saying, oh, this person is angry right now.
Yes.
I better don't feed the anger, because otherwise you're not going to have a constructive conversation.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, let's just talk about that situation where, let's say it is a stressful situation, someone's angry or upset. Which one of these emotions can you utilize to sort of help diffuse? I'll use the word diffuse, might not be the right word, but to help calm that situation down?
I would say really the bottom three: empathy, compassion, and interest are very important. First of all, to really become aware of the empathy helps you become aware, oh, this person is angry. And typically, knowing a little bit about anger typically comes from when somebody violates a value, a deep held value that we have. Now, the reason why we have this political division, like in a country like the United States, but also in many other countries, and even in Germany, where I come from, or France, or other places, we have that division, and people are angry. They hate each other almost like enemies.
Yes.
And they're both good. You know what I'm saying? Like the average person are good people. They have good intentions. They just have different value systems. And so they get angry because somebody else is behaving in a way that violates their own value. So we have this,
or forcing their values onto you.
That's even, then people become, resentful and so on. So
Yes.
So my point is to your question is to become aware of that, saying, okay, so there's been a value has been violated for this person. Let me understand, what is the value that has been violated right now?
Yes.
Right. And I find it, for me, like, this is super empowering. If I can shift my own emotions, if I don't respond to anger with my own anger or with fear, to really with a certain calmness or centeredness and understanding there's something has happened there. Let me understand that better. Yeah. And I have examples in the book that are very severe, like where people behaved in a way they said, where such a conflict, I have this example of the Ku Klux Klan, like African-American activist encountering a Ku Klux Klan member, and the way he conducted himself that helped him to have a conversation and even motivate or mobilize some of the Ku Klux Klan member to leave the Ku Klux Klan. Yes. If he would have reacted angry, maybe even with violence, which people might have justified. They might have said there was a good reason because he felt threatened or whatever, but he didn't do it. He actually became curious and said, "Why do you hate me if you don't even know me?"
Yeah,
that was it. Yes. That was practicing interest.
Yes. So, Reiner, what was your inspiration for writing this book?
Yeah, I tell you, I facilitate transformation and like innovation and transformational change, and I've been observing people, and in order to make change happen, people need to change their behavior in a sustained way. Okay, and I looked at in that process, I look always what are the barriers, what is in the way of making that change happen. And what I noticed, that there's rational reasons why people don't want to change sometimes, but they can be overcome. The rational reasons you can find solutions for. The ones that were emotional barriers, the emotional obstacles,
Yes,
that were invisible, that for a regular leader, like somebody that is not knowledgeable in that space, they would overlook and they would not create the change. We hear the stories about change efforts failing and so on. And it's my observation from having been involved in many change efforts in the corporate world, in startups and so on, but also coaching, has been that the emotional were the biggest barriers, and learning in that domain helped to make the change happen. That helped people change their behavior, because it's clear, right? If somebody is resisting, I want to give you an example that is very powerful. I came into a coaching situation. This was a leader that was successful on paper, but his boss, the CEO of the company, was criticizing him not being a visionary leader. Okay, and he worked his, in English, his butt off, 16 hours a day, even on the weekend. He put out fires of his team constantly. And as I got into the conversation with him, and heard the stories, and I listened a little bit, and there were stories of resentment. So I asked him, said, "Are you resentful?" And he said, and I explained what it meant. It meant you tell yourself stories of victimhood. Somebody did something bad to me, and it's not fair. In this case, was his boss.
Yes.
And he said, "Yeah, I feel resentful towards my boss." And I explained to him that this is an emotion of the past. This is your mental energy stays in the past. You're constantly ruminating about what the unfairness that has happened to you, in this case by your boss, how that is not fair, and how you wished you could make it fair. All your energy goes into that, and you cannot think about the future. So you cannot become a visionary leader. You cannot. It was a barrier to optimism. Okay, this is just one example. I can give you dozens of others.
Yes.
So this was an eye opener for him. So he asked me then to understand this now. So how do I get out of this? How do I get out of resentment? And he said, well, there's no straight line from resentment to optimism. You cannot shift your emotions suddenly from resentment to optimism unless you shift first to another emotion, which is acceptance. You're accepting that this was happened to you, happened in the past, and you cannot change the past. Doesn't mean you have to say it was good that this happened. You don't have to agree to it, but you can say this is something I cannot change. So ruminating on it, on the story of the past, doesn't help me. Yes. So I accept this, and suddenly mental energy becomes free, emotional energy becomes free to move to. So today, this is now a few years later, he has moved up multiple levels. He leads an organization of thousands of people now, and he's considered to be a visionary and inspirational leader by his people, by his leadership team.
Yes,
I know that because I also asked me to work with his leadership team. So that's why I have a little bit of consistent view of the story and how this evolved for his. So the emotional shift made it possible to bring out the best in him as a leader that he had all along. But this emotional barrier, in this case resentment, kept him from maximizing his potential.
Yes, very nice. So Reiner, let me ask you one last question here. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't? Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, the only thing I was thinking, people that want to learn more, that are interested to learn more in this domain and how to learn these emotional-based leadership skills, or to identify one of those that they think might help them to move forward to become better leaders, they can find on my website, reinerlomb.com. But you can also go to the Amazon, in any country where Amazon is distributing books, and find Aspire, 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change.
Yes, very good. And I will make sure all of that information is in the show notes so our listeners can find it there. Reiner, this has been a fabulous conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for being on the show.
It was a pleasure, Bela. Thank you for having me.
Bela, a really interesting interview. So Okay, here's the $20 question, €20 question, depending on which side of the pond you're on. Which of the 7 emotions do you think are most important specifically for entrepreneurs? Or are they all kind of equal in your mind?
Wow, Mike, I wasn't expecting such a difficult question for our 150th episode.
Sorry.
You got to give me a softball there. So I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna say. It depends. Uh, I think they're all important, and they're important at different times. So it's like any of these characteristics, emotions, whatever you want to call them. Um, and certain situations, one may rise to the top as being the most important, or there might be 2 or 3 that are very important in that particular instance. And that juggles around depending upon on what's sort of going on, right? If it's a high stress situation or there's an argument between somebody, then like empathy and compassion may be really important, right? If it's a conflict situation. If it's a motivational situation where you're giving a talk to an organization, you're trying to motivate them and move them forward in a different direction, then positivity might be more important, and resilience, this notion of we're tough, we can do this. So I think it depends. And I think the important part to me, or what I took from my conversation with Reiner, is that all of these are important, number one. Number two, that these are skill sets that you can develop. We often talk about, well, there are people who are natural leaders, and that's true. For whatever reasons, those genes were turned on when they were born. But you can take these and you can hone them, and you can polish them, and you can understand what they mean, and you can figure out when to use them in a sort of a constructive way to move the organization forward, to increase your leadership skills. So to me, that was one of the important ahas in my conversation with him, was that don't think I'm just not a positive person. Well, that's a skill that you can work on. And I also find it interesting, Mike, that none of these things, at least I don't remember, ever sort of being taught in business school. Right? We talk about measurements, we talk about a whole bunch of things, but I think in most courses, they don't really talk about these sort of traits and these sort of emotions.
So Bela, totally agree with you that it's like speaking multiple foreign languages, right? That you use one language at one time with one set of people, and then you have to turn around and use another language, right, in another situation. So I totally like your kind of analogy to this idea that you need them all at different times. But I think we do teach a little more now. Certainly empathy there's a lot of entrepreneurship programs that have been teaching design thinking, right?
Yes.
Which kind of comes, there's a dual kind of home for this. One is on the West Coast of the US, and we look at kind of IDEO and the Stanford Design School. And then on the other side, the Hasso-Plattner Institute here in Germany, in Potsdam, Germany, not Potsdam, New York, where you and I have spent some time together. But this is where a lot of the heart of design thinking has developed, as well as other parts of the world. But in fact, just yesterday, I was co-teaching a class with my friend Daniel Braun, and he's a really great teacher of empathy. And I do think empathy is something that, yes, it's an emotion, but it's also a skill, and it kind of is one of these fundamental skills. I mean, he did talk about this as a pyramid, but I do think that this empathy definitely leads to compassion. It definitely leads to interest. It definitely leads to trust. It definitely leads to resilience. So I think if I had to pick my favorite, I would say it's empathy. And I would hope that every business school is teaching to some extent empathy, is either part of design thinking or corporate social responsibility or ethics.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see that more. I think we used to teach it, and we didn't call it empathy, right? It would be like knowing your customers, or, you know what I mean, right? Business intelligence or something like that. But we need to, and now there's a lot of service learning too. That's the other big trend in the US, where you go out and do these projects, and these projects out in the community, right? As part of your education. And those are designed, even though they may not call it that, they're designed to bring out compassion and empathy and inspiration and positivity and all these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's cool.
I think about it in sort of a broader context. So I agree with you that this notion of applying these things to help understand your customer and to sort of make sure your products and services meet their needs is important. But I also think about it from a organizational leadership perspective. I think here again, that's another big area that is really important for leaders, is how do you lead the organization? And these emotions are important in that endeavor. And I don't think we instill in people that these are things that you can learn and polish and improve on.
It's the next step. It's design. It's moving from design thinking to leading, right? Using these some of these skills, which is an interesting idea. But the other thing when we talk about born versus learned, right, is then you inject this. Everybody wants people to be genuine. And if I learn something, I'm a little skeptical of the term genuine. I mean, I get it that I have to be believable. I have to sound like I mean what I say. But, if I learn something, it's not natural to me, right? Then I don't need to learn it, right? But I think that I can do something just as well that I've learned, right, recently even, than things that I'm born with. It takes some work, but.
Well, look, I was, when I was born, I didn't know how to do calculus.
No. I still don't know how to do calculus. And I took courses in it. I was horrible at math.
So yeah, I don't get hung up on that, as long as what you said is true, which is genuine, right? Which talks about you're not doing that just to manipulate individuals.
Right.
You're doing it because you believe in something, and it's a way of leading the organization to move in that direction.
Agreed. Hey, let me ask you one more question. Do you think some of these emotions are easier for people to kind of learn and gain control over? Is there one you'd recommend that they start with to try to practice, or does that depend?
Oh gosh, I don't know, because again, in some situations, empathy is really important, and in other situations, positivity is really important. I think, I don't know if you do them sequentially or you do them in parallel for learning, but I think you just pick one and sort of try to understand what it is, and then try to bring it into your daily life.
Yeah, practice it every day.
In every interaction, right? Think about every interaction you have. I'm at the grocery store. I'm buying something. Which of these can I use at the grocery store when I'm asking someone for help to help me find something?
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
And then I'm home with my partner, my spouse, right? And that's a whole nother, podcast in itself. But there are things that you can say, oh, okay, this would be a good place for me to polish this skill, because I'm not really understanding what's going on here. I clearly am not have any empathy. I don't have compassion to understand what my spouse is going through here. So I need to figure out how to do that better.
Yeah. So I think empathy, compassion, interest in what others are doing, being optimistic, and positivity, that those 5 are pretty easy to practice on a daily basis. Probably inspiration and trust are a little more long-term and are based on. So I'll go 5 and 2.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm in.
Neat. All right. But interesting talk. What do you think? Time to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so, Mike.
All right, listeners, thanks again from the bottom of our hearts for joining us today. We hope you found the conversation with Reiner Lomb interesting and thought-provoking. If you've had questions about what we've discussed, as always, please feel free to get in touch with us. The best way is by email, and you can reach us at bela.and.mike@gmail.com.
When we started this almost 4 years ago, Mike, I never thought we'd get to 150 episodes.
No, and people still listen, and it's not just my mother. It's really remarkable. Hi, Mom.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Our listenership has built. It's been really steady, and it's just really been a lot of fun doing these 150 episodes with you. And I hope that we can continue this and do another 150.
Sounds good. I look forward to it, Bela.
Yeah. So, hey, listeners, if you like the podcast, tell your friends and associates about it. Hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting app if you haven't already. And until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you all soon.
Bela from over here in Münster, Germany, as we say, auf Wiedersehen. Until next time.